Before you assume you understand American Jews, consider that they stretched an invisible wire around all of Manhattan, engineered entire towns that fall silent every Friday, like someone cut the power, turned America's poorest zip code into one of its safest and best-fed communities, and built Hollywood from nothing after polite society slammed every other door. Facts so structurally strange that hearing them for the first time, you will assume someone invented them. Now, let us begin. Number 10. We start in early 1900s, Los Angeles, where a group of Jewish immigrants did something that would reshape global culture forever. Nearly every major Hollywood studio was founded by Jewish men from Eastern Europe. Universal, Paramount, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, Columbia. The men who built these empires arrived in America with almost nothing. Carl Laemmle came from Germany in 1884 with $50 sewn into the lining of his coat. The Warner Brothers fled grinding poverty in Poland, where their father repaired shoes for a living. Louis B. Mayer, who would go on to run the most powerful studio in the world, started out collecting scrap metal in Canada. Adolf Zukor arrived from Hungary as a 16-year-old orphan. These men did not choose the film industry because they loved cinema. Most of them had never seen a motion picture before arriving in America. They chose it because every other door was closed. Banking would not have them. Insurance firms turned them away. Law offices and country clubs were shut tight. But the movie business was so new, so disreputable in those early years, that nobody had thought to exclude them from it yet. By 1930, Jewish founders controlled over 80% of the American film industry. According to the historian Neal Gabler, these outsiders did not just make films, they invented an image of America itself. The dreams, the values, the romance of the country that the rest of the world would come to recognize were shaped in large part by men who were never fully accepted by the country they were defining. The Hollywood sign went up in 1923, overlooking an empire built almost entirely by people who had been turned away at every other entrance. A group of outsiders building an empire is remarkable. But the next fact involves something most New Yorkers walk beneath every single day without knowing it exists. Number 9. There is a thin, invisible wire strung around a vast portion of Manhattan. It is made of translucent fishing line or narrow cable. It runs along utility poles, fences, walls, and building edges for approximately 18 miles, forming a continuous loop around the borough. It is called an ERUV. In Jewish religious law, carrying objects or pushing a pram outside the home is forbidden on the Sabbath. But if an area is enclosed within a symbolic boundary, it is treated as a shared private space, and those activities become permitted. That is what the ERUV does. It turns the island of Manhattan into one enormous symbolic home. Every single Friday before sundown, a designated checker walks or drives the full 18-mile route to inspect the wire. If a single section has snapped or fallen, if a tree branch has broken the line, or a construction crew has disturbed a pole, the ERUV is invalid. It must be repaired before the Sabbath begins or the entire boundary fails. This inspection has taken place every week, without exception, for decades. There are over 200 ERUVs across North America, registered with an organization that tracks their locations and status. The concept dates back to the Talmud, over 1,500 years ago. Legal disputes over ERUVs have reached the United States federal courts. In 2002, a case involving a New Jersey borough went all the way to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And yet, if you stopped 100 people on the streets of Midtown Manhattan and asked them whether they were standing inside a religious boundary right now, almost none of them would know what you were talking about. There it is, though. A thin, translucent wire against the sky, strung between two utility poles on the Upper West Side. Thousands of people pass beneath it every single hour without a glance. An invisible boundary around one of the world's great cities is strange enough. But the next fact involves an entire holiday empire that once rivaled Las Vegas and then vanished almost overnight. Number 8. From the 1920s through the 1970s, the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York hosted a sprawling network of Jewish resort hotels so vast and so culturally dominant that the region became known worldwide as the Borscht Belt. At its peak in the 1950s and 60s, these resorts welcomed over 1 million guests every summer season. That figure was comparable to Las Vegas visitor numbers at the time. Grossinger's resort alone covered 1,200 acres. It had its own airstrip and its own post office. The Concord Hotel had 1,500 rooms, the largest indoor swimming pool in the world, and a nightclub that seated 3,000 people. These were not modest holiday camps. They were self-contained worlds. And they were the launchpad for some of the most famous names in entertainment. Jerry Lewis performed at the Borscht Belt before anyone outside New Jersey knew his name. Joan Rivers, Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, and Don Rickles all sharpened their craft on those resort stages. The comedy style that emerged from the Catskills was fast, self-deprecating, and observational. It essentially invented modern American stand-up comedy. Then it all collapsed. The civil rights movement and changing social attitudes meant that Jewish families were no longer turned away from other resorts. Affordable air travel opened up Florida and the Caribbean. Atlantic City legalized gambling. The guests stopped coming. Grossinger's closed in 1986. The Concord closed in 1998. Both buildings sat abandoned for years. Sullivan County, the heartland of the Borscht Belt, saw its median household income fall 23% between 1970 and 2000. The Concord Hotel was completely demolished to make way for a modern resort casino, leaving only the memories and photographs of its final abandoned years. A place that once echoed with the laughter of a million summers now echoes with nothing at all. An empire of resorts that shaped American comedy and then crumbled is striking. Number 7. In the early 1900s, Jewish businessmen in Los Angeles faced a wall of exclusion. The city's elite social clubs refused them membership. Residential neighborhoods enforced written covenants that prohibited the sale of property to Jewish buyers. Hancock Park in Bel Air maintained these restrictions well into the 1940s. So a group of Jewish developers decided to build their own community from scratch. Burton Green and his partners in the Rodeo Land and Water Company purchased a vast stretch of undeveloped bean fields west of the city in 1906. They paid approximately $670,000, roughly equivalent to $22 million today. The land had been a Mexican land grant called Rancho Rodeo de las Aguas. There was nothing there. No roads, no buildings, just open fields. They built the Beverly Hills Hotel in 1912, before the city even formally existed, as a lure to attract buyers. The city incorporated in 1914 with a population of just 674. Within a decade, the same Jewish studio founders from our earlier fact began building mansions in the area. Douglas Fairbanks and Mary Pickford built their famous Pickfair estate, and the celebrities followed. Today, Beverly Hills 90210 is one of the most recognized postcodes on Earth. Rodeo Drive is lined with the most expensive shops in the Western Hemisphere, and the whole thing began on a patch of dirt that was purchased because no one would sell land anywhere else to the men who bought it. Building a legendary city from rejection is extraordinary, but the next statistic is so disproportionate that when you hear it, you will assume it must be wrong. Number 6. American Jews make up roughly 2.4% of the United States population, just over 7 million people in a country of 330 million. Yet Jewish Americans have been awarded more than 35% of all Nobel Prizes won by the United States. Across the global total, Jewish laureates from all countries represent approximately 22% of all Nobel Prize winners in history, despite Jewish people comprising less than 0.2% of the world's population. In physics alone, the list of American laureates includes Albert Einstein, Richard Feynman, and Murray Gell-Mann. In medicine, Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine and then refused to patent it. When a journalist asked him who owned the patent, he replied that it belonged to the people and asked whether you could patent the sun. Gertrude Elion developed treatments for leukemia that are still in use today. In economics, Paul Samuelson, Milton Friedman, and Daniel Kahneman. In literature, Saul Bellow, Isaac Bashevis Singer, and Bob Dylan. According to Pew Research Center data from 2021, Jewish Americans are the most highly educated religious group in the United States. 58% hold a university degree, compared to 33% of the general population. Scholars have pointed to the centuries-old tradition of Talmudic study, a practice rooted in analytical debate, questioning, and close reading of texts as a possible cultural factor. But even that explanation does not fully account for a disproportion this extreme. It is simply one of the most statistically improbable patterns in modern intellectual history. And it is entirely real. Number 5. In 1900, the Lower East Side of Manhattan had a population density of approximately 334,000 people per square mile in certain census tracts. That made it the single most densely populated place on the planet. The vast majority of these residents were Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. Between 1880 and 1920, approximately 2.5 million Eastern European Jews arrived in America. Most of them landed at Ellis Island and walked straight into the tenement blocks of the Lower East Side. By 1910, over 540,000 Jewish immigrants were crammed into roughly 1.5 square miles. The apartments were 325 square feet, housing families of 8 to 10 people. Some buildings held over 100 residents. One block bounded by Orchard, Stanton, Allen, and Rivington streets was recorded as the most populated block in the world. Tuberculosis rates in the district were 4 times the city average, according to New York City Department of Health records from 1901. And yet, from this impossible compression emerged an extraordinary concentration of culture. The Yiddish Theater District on 2nd Avenue rivaled Broadway in its ambition and its audience. The Daily Forward newspaper, published in Yiddish, reached a circulation of 275,000. The Forward building at 175 East Broadway still stands today. It was once the headquarters of the largest Yiddish-language newspaper in the world. Labor unions, mutual aid societies, and political movements all took root in those cramped tenement kitchens. By the 1950s, most Jewish families had moved to Brooklyn, the Bronx, and the suburbs. The neighborhood transformed almost completely within a single generation. But if you visit Hester Street today and look at a photograph from 1903, the same market day scene, every inch of pavement covered with push carts and people, the sky barely visible between the fire escapes, you will understand the scale of what happened there. A neighborhood so packed it broke world records is extraordinary. But the next fact is a reversal so complete it barely seems possible. A place that once banned Jewish people entirely and is now one of the wealthiest Jewish communities in America. Number 4. For decades, Palm Beach, Florida was one of the most exclusive and most restricted communities in the United States. The Bath and Tennis Club and the Everglades Club, the 2 most elite social institutions on the island, barred Jewish members well into the 1990s. Real estate deeds in Palm Beach County contained written clauses that explicitly prohibited the sale of property to people described in the legal language as Hebrews. These covenants remained in property records through the 1960s. Hotels turned Jewish guests away at the front desk. The message was clear, and it was enforced for generations. Then the money came. In the 1980s and the 1990s, Jewish business magnates from New York began purchasing estates on the island. The shift was slow at first, and then it was not. Today, an estimated 25 to 30% of Palm Beach's permanent residents are Jewish, according to local civic association estimates. Temple Emmanuel on the island is one of the most affluent congregations in the entire country. The median home value in Palm Beach now exceeds $10 million. The transformation is generational. The grandchildren of people who were turned away at hotel doors now own some of the most valuable properties on the island. Worth Avenue, the most expensive shopping street in Florida, sits in a town that once had signs making it clear that certain people were not welcome. Those signs are gone. The families are still there. A community reclaiming a place that once rejected it is powerful. But the next fact is about something happening right now. A small New Jersey town growing so fast that demographers genuinely cannot explain it. Number 3. Lakewood, New Jersey had a population of roughly 60,000 in the year 2000. By the 2020 census, it had surpassed 135,000. That is a growth rate of over 125% in 20 years. It is one of the fastest growing municipalities in the entire northeastern United States. And it is driven almost entirely by the expansion of its Orthodox Jewish community. At the center of Lakewood sits Beth Midrash Gvoha, the largest yeshiva outside of Israel. A yeshiva is a center for Talmudic study, and this one enrolls approximately 6,700 students. That is more than many British universities. The average household size in Lakewood is 4.7 people, compared to the national average of 2.5. Families are large, communities are tight, and the infrastructure has grown to match. Lakewood now has more private schools than public schools, over 130 private institutions serving the community. There are kosher supermarkets the size of a large Tesco. There is a Jewish volunteer ambulance service called Hatzolah that operates 24 hours a day. There are community courts called Beit Din that resolve disputes within Jewish law. Property values in Lakewood have increased over 200% since 2005. Surrounding townships have watched this transformation with a mixture of fascination and unease. The Asbury Park Press has documented the tensions and the growing pains in detail. New housing developments radiate outward from the yeshiva campus at the center of town. Construction cranes are still visible at the edges. A quiet retirement town has become a religious metropolis within a single generation, and it is still growing. A town doubling its population in 20 years is remarkable, but the next fact is a paradox so complete that the United States government has never been able to fully explain it. Number 2. Kiryas Joel is a Hasidic Jewish village in Orange County, New York. It was founded in 1977 by followers of the Satmar Rebbe, Joel Teitelbaum, a Holocaust survivor who rebuilt his community from the ashes of Europe. According to the United States Census Bureau, Kiryas Joel was the poorest municipality in America. The 2010 census recorded a median household income of $17,929. The poverty rate was 62.2%. By every federal metric, this was a place of extreme deprivation. But walk through the streets of Kiryas Joel and you will not see what poverty is supposed to look like. There is virtually no homelessness. The violent crime rate is nearly zero according to FBI uniform crime reports. Community-run organizations provide free food distribution, free clothing, free childcare, and medical referrals. No one goes without a meal. No one sleeps on the street. The explanation lies in how the community is structured. Large families are the norm, with an average of 6 or more children per household. Young married men spend years in full-time Talmudic study, earning no income. These choices drive reported earnings far below the poverty line. But the community functions as a single organism. Wealth is shared, resources are pooled. The village runs its own bus system, its own ambulance service, and its own social services network. In 2018, Kiryas Joel incorporated into the newly created town of Palm Tree, one of the newest municipalities in New York State. The population as of 2020 was approximately 35,000, nearly all Satmar Hasidic. Government statisticians classified it as the poorest place in America. But if you stood on one of its residential streets on a weekday afternoon and watched children playing in the road with doors open and no fences and no alarms, you would never use the word poor to describe what you were seeing. A village that broke every assumption about poverty is difficult to forget. But the final fact on our list may be the hardest to believe of all, because it involves entire American towns that go completely silent every single week, as if someone reached over and switched the world off. Number 1. In multiple American towns and cities with large Orthodox Jewish populations, life functionally halts every Friday evening at sundown. Shops close, streets empty. Cars disappear from roads that were bumper to bumper an hour earlier. Traffic lights cycle through their colors for no one. The silence lasts approximately 25 hours. It does not resume until Saturday night after dark. In Lakewood, New Jersey, the commercial districts that process thousands of customers every day fall silent by Friday afternoon. Kosher bakeries sell out their challah bread by 2 in the afternoon and lock their doors. In Borough Park, Brooklyn, 13th Avenue is one of the busiest commercial streets in the borough 6 days a week. By sundown on Friday, it is virtually deserted. Journalists and photographers from New York have documented this transformation dozens of times, and the images are always startling. The ERUV we spoke about earlier enables families to walk to synagogue, but driving, using a phone, cooking, and operating electrical switches are all avoided by observant households. Restaurants and shops owned by observant Jews display Shabbat hours year-round. The closing times shift every single week because they follow the sunset, which changes with the seasons. In the Five Towns area of Long Island and in Teaneck, New Jersey, non-Jewish residents have described the weekly transformation in local forums as eerie. One resident called it like a snow day without the snow. This practice predates every institution in the Western world. It has been observed continuously for over 3,000 years. And the economic cost is real. Businesses voluntarily forfeit peak Friday evening and all-day Saturday trading hours. That amounts to an estimated 20% of potential weekly revenue. They do it every week without exception and without complaint. A street in Borough Park at 7 in the evening on a Friday in December. The shop front's dark, the pavement's empty. A single family walking home together in the cold, their breath visible under the streetlights. No cars, no phones, and no sound but footsteps. In the most restless country on earth, an entire neighborhood has chosen to stop, and they do it every single week. They have done it for 3,000 years, and nobody told them to.